All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming and joining us for another Schmorg with Partners Cleveland. Just some people asked, the food today was from Cantina. So if you enjoyed it, check them out. They're in University Circle. They have a nice little restaurant. Once again, we are here every Tuesday night learning. On a regular Tuesday night when it's not a Schmorg, we're in the small base medrash on the other side of the building. You are more than welcome to join us. Again, we don't serve a full dinner every Tuesday night, but there are refreshments and fruit, and it's a really nice learning environment. We encourage you to come and join us. I do also want to remind you that we have Schmorgs coming up every first Tuesday of the month throughout the summer. So August 2nd, September 6th. August 2nd, our speaker will be Mrs. Koval, right here from JFX, along with Rabbi Landis. September is still TBD. If you want to speak, talk to Rabbi Landis. So again, every Tuesday night we're here and you're welcome to join us. I also want to call your attention, there's signs throughout the building about a concert that's here on Thursday night. One of my favorite bands, Simply Tzvat, is here from Israel. It's really wonderful music with a dinner, I think. I'm not sure about the whole event, but there are flyers around. You can see it. There's a few more spots still open. I know it's limited space, but I just wanted to call your attention to that. And now, our speaker for tonight, we have really have the pleasure to have with us a special local rabbi here in Cleveland. He's had his time in other cities, but now we're lucky enough to have him here with us in Cleveland. He runs the yeshiva across the street, Avas Torah. And without further ado, Rabbi Spero.
Can I walk around with it? Phil Donahue style? No, it's okay. Okay. Thank everyone for coming tonight. Rabbi Landis, thank you for giving me this opportunity and for hosting the food and the drinks. So our topic tonight is we're going to discuss salt. So if you look in last week's parsha, that's Parshas Kairach, you see the mention is made. Hashem tells, can I say Hashem or do I have to say God every time? Everyone can tell me. We'll stick with Hashem. If you know what I mean, though, you can raise your hand and I'll tell you. Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron that when they offer up karbanos, the sacrificial offerings, they have to be offered up with salt. You look, is really the source for this is found earlier in the Torah on Parshas Vayikra, Leviticus, and it talks there also about the obligation to bring salt by all the karbanos. This actually is the reason why we have the custom today to put salt on our Shabbos table, right? Really, it should be done whenever a person makes a bracha on bread. They should dip the bread in salt. Al pi Kabbalah, it's brought down to do it 3 times. But this is for the same reason. So what's the reason of this? I want to talk about 2 ideas of salt. I'll try to get to both of them. We'll go through them each briefly and help us understand the importance of salt and how salt relates to us. So the first source I want to bring is, you look in Parshas Vayikra, there's a beautiful maral, the Rashi and a maral. So the pasuk talks about the Melech Bris, right? That Hashem made a covenant with salt, right? With Klal Yisrael, Shabris Krusa LeMelech Mesheshes Me Brachis. This covenant was made with salt from the 6 days of creation. Shehuvtchu hamayim atachtainim likar b'mizbeach hamelech. That the lower waters came closer on the mizbeach, on the altar, due to salt. What does this mean? We know that there was on the 2nd day of creation. If you ever notice, the 2nd day of creation, it does not use the word tov. It does not use the word good. Right? It uses it 2 times on Tuesday, on Yom HaShlishi, but on Yom HaSheni, which is Monday, it's not used at all. Why not? Because this is the first, we'll call machlokas, the first division that happened within creation. Hashem separated the Mayim Elyonim and the Mayim Tachtonim, the upper waters and the lower waters. The upper waters went up to the heavens. That's why they're called Shamayim, right? The word Shamayim, which means heavens in Hebrew, literally means Shamayim. That's where the water is. And the lower waters are here, what we see, our oceans. So obviously, the lower waters were chagrined. They were very disappointed that they were not up in this. They were not up closer to Hashem, so to speak. Hashem, obviously, the whole world is filled with His glory. But on a physical level, at least, they felt that they were further from the heavens, and they felt it was unfair. So it says they complained. They complained to God. They complained to Hashem. Why do we have to be in the lower waters? Why can't we be up there? Hashem says, I'm going to give you. I'm going to appease you. I'm going to give you a gift that will make you feel okay about being in the lower waters, being distant from the heavens. What was the gift that Hashem gave them? Salt. And that salt is to be offered up with all the sacrificial offerings. So there's two questions we have to ask. Number one, so again, what is the significance of salt? And that we'll actually explain in a few more moments. And the second question is, why would this help them? Right? On the one hand, you have these waters that are living up in the sky. On the other hand, you have these waters that are living here on earth, and they have salt. They're also used, the measure says, he also used for Nisach HaMayim, for the water libation ceremony, which is done once a year on Sukkot. But nonetheless, it doesn't seem to be a fair trade to give up being close to God for just using salt on the altar. So the Maharal, who was a sage in the 16th century, tells us an unbelievable idea. The Maharal says that the striving to be close is greater than the closeness itself. In other words, when a person desires something, when a person pushes himself to do something, by the way, whenever the Gemara, whenever the Talmud, whenever the Medrash tells us ideas, mishalim, about inanimate objects, you see many different places, the sun and the moon, the waters, all these different things, like the trees, there's many different places, many different sources. I'm not going to get into exactly what it means right now, but the purpose of it is meant to be an allegory for how we as humans are meant to react. So this idea of the water being satisfied with the salt teaches us the very important idea that it's not about being there, but it's about the journey. That a person has to live themselves a life of striving. Right? A person has to constantly be with the mindset of they're choosing to be, right? They're choosing to become, not choosing to remain as they are, right? A person who chooses to remain as they are, right, it's a very low level, regardless of what level they're on, right? The fact that they remain where they are, that's considered to be a very low level. The Rabbi Spero was a Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak, who I learned for a brief time. So he's a very brilliant person. So when he was a young man, he was learning in the Panovich Yeshiva, and he was a student of Rav Eliyahu Dessler, the Michtav Eliyahu, the famous Michtav Eliyahu. And Rav Dessler gave a speech one week in the yeshiva, and he spoke about the importance of striving, the importance of constantly wanting to grow and not being satisfied with where you are. A person should be happy where they are. Difference between happy and satisfied. Happy means I like who I am, and I'm happy with what I've accomplished, but at the same time, I want to achieve more, right? And this idea that the Dessler explained was we should never be satisfied in that way. We should always want to constantly grow. And we're not judged on what we know necessarily, but on what our striving, our desire. And Rav Beryl, who is still a very brilliant person, he's in his 90s right now, he should live and be well. He said it changed his life when he heard this speech from his Rebbe, from the Michtav Eliyahu. So that's the first idea that we have from the salt. The idea of salt is something that represents to us the idea of striving, the idea of wanting to grow, the idea of not wanting to be in the same place. A very, very important idea. By the way, it's interesting. On Monday, if you look at the Shir Shal Yom, at the end of davening, we say a specific psalm, right? There's 7 different ones for each day of the week. The one chosen for Monday is one written by the sons of Korach, right? The sons of Korach, right? They did not go with their father, right? And they were saved. They fell a little bit into the pit, but they weren't killed in the pit. They rectified their father's sin of machlokas, right? And that's why that's why we choose Monday, the day where it doesn't say Taiv, the day it's a source of division. We use Bnei Korach as our guide. Even people who are immersed in division, immersed in machlokes, immersed in disagreement, are able to get themselves out of it. The second idea of salt is a Gemara in Maseches Bechoros. So there's a lot of interesting Gemaras. Some are found in Bechoros, some are found in Masechtas Sanhedrin. These Gemaras refer to the Saba Devei Atunei, the elders of the schools of Athens. So historically, it actually is not referring to Greek scholars, it's referring to the Roman scholars who had learned in like the Greek schools. Right? They had learned in the Aristotelian schools, and that's why their schools were called the Devei Atune. The Gemara uses the word Devei as it means house in Aramaic. It uses it to refer to yeshiva actually also. Right, Tana Devei Eliyahu, Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, they learned in those yeshivas. That's what Devei means. Here it means in the Greek houses of philosophy that after the Greeks, it was carried on by the Romans. So very often they would challenge the Chacham, they would challenge the sages with different Gemaras, with different questions that they felt would prove the supremacy of the Roman and Greek philosophy. And they always had it, every question is based on the idea of ultimately Hashem has forsaken the Jewish people and now other nations have this important role in the world. So the expert in this topic was named Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Right, very interesting. I'm not sure why, but it's very interesting. When he's referred to all over the Talmud, he's called Rabbi Yeshua, and whenever he debates with these Romans, he's always called Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. I'm not sure why they changed his name. So the Gemara, they asked him a question. They said, "Milcha kisaria, right? But my malchile. What do you do with salt to prevent salt from spoiling?" Right, salt was used in the old days, still today. You used to pack cheese in salt. They used to pack bread in salt. They used to pack meat in salt, and it would prevent it from spoiling. So they asked him, "What do you pack salt with to prevent it from spoiling?" So he says, "Besilsa dichandusa." You pack it with the afterbirth of a mule. After a mule gives birth, you use the afterbirth to pack it. Obviously, that's an absurd line. They asked him, mules don't give birth. Mules are sterile. Right? Mules are the offspring of a horse and a donkey. Right? They themselves are not able to reproduce. So he says to him, "Umilcha misaria," the salt really spoil. That's the end of the Gemara. Very, very short, cryptic Gemara. So the Gra opens up our eyes. The Vilna Gaon, he wrote commentaries on almost all these Gemaras with the elders of Athens, and he explains what was happening here. So he says he was in the Torah, as we just mentioned before, we refer to the bris melach, the covenant of salt. So he said, and this relates to the covenant that Hashem made with the Jewish people. And the covenant Hashem made with the Jewish people, ideally, besides the previous lesson we just mentioned, the lesson of learning to strive, of learning to grow, is also meant to teach us the idea that our covenant will never spoil. Right? They found salt on different archaeological digs in different places, and they said salt that's thousands of years old, you can still use. Right? It's much coarser, it's a heavier type of salt, but you can still use that salt. Salt never spoils. And that's why Hashem used, one of the reasons that we said before we'll get to, one of the reasons why salt is used on the Mizbeach, on the altar of the temple of the Beis HaMikdash, was because salt specifically never spoils. So the Romans were coming now and telling Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, you might say you use salt. You might say, oh, we use salt all the time. We use salt by all our sacrificial offerings. We use salt on the table when we make a bracha on bread. But look at you now, right? The Jews, obviously, this is a low point for the Jewish people. Historically, we're talking about roughly about 1,850 years ago. Right? It was after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the second temple, while the Jews were still in Israel. Right? And there's no question that that Yiddishkeit, Judaism, was not in such a strong place at that time. So the Romans were saying to him, your salt is spoiling. So what does Rabbi Shulchan answer back to them? He says, though the way we'll keep it is with the afterbirth of a mule. Now, what would happen if a person had a mule? I remember when my kids were little, we went and bought a bunch of guinea pigs for them. And the guy in the store told us they're all females. So that's what we do when people buy guinea pigs. We sell them either all male or all female, so you don't have to worry about having kids. Like 3 weeks into us having them, one of them gave birth to like 6 little tiny guinea pigs, right? So I first I said it's a miracle, and I was super excited, and I wanted to, then I realized, my wife corrected me, said probably one of them is a male, we can assume. And so it was. So if a person has a mule that gives birth, they can look at it that way. It's a miraculous birth. It must, or really they can just say it's obviously a donkey. It might look like a mule, but in fact it's a donkey by the fact that it gives birth. So Rabbi Shua ben Chananya was saying back to these Roman philosophers. He says, well, look at the reality. Yes, we're not doing great, and Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, definitely need some strengthening. But at the same time, look at the amount of schools we have for young children, right? This is actually in the era when it became widespread. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi Shua ben Gamla instituted the widespread schooling system because people weren't always able to teach their children. So there were schools all over the land of Israel. The Gemara discusses, look at the Gemara in Gittin, where actually the Gemara, which discusses the destruction of the second base of Mikdash, the Gemara talks about how many marketplaces there were in Jerusalem, how many schools there were, thousands upon thousands of Jewish students learning at school. The Bishop Hanani told them, the fact that we see so many children, obviously our covenant did not end, right? The salt did not spoil, so to speak. So it's a good thing to have in mind. Number one, when we have salt, right? Salt in general, it brings out the flavor in food. Number one, when we eat salt, just to occasionally tell ourselves, especially on Friday night, remind ourselves that this is our covenant with Hashem. This is the bris that we have with Hashem, that the Jewish people have with Hashem. It will never spoil, it will never end. And the second thing we should remind ourselves is to remind ourselves of that salt was used to appease the lower waters, and it was something used on the altar and on the Mizbeach, something that was constantly used in a way to grow, to strive to be close to Hashem, and that our main goal is not necessarily where we are, but where we're striving to be. Okay, thank you.